DTFF.
Again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Hey, welcome back to DTFF, everyone. Happy Tuesday evening. If I may say to all my educators out there, I know at least in Wisconsin here, we are on the last week of the regular school year. So congratulations for almost making it all the way there. Just a few more days. So hang tight. So it feels great to be on this end of it. Jake, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. Not as good as you, because you're looking forward to that light at the end of the tunnel right now with a vacation on the other end of it. Me,
sure,
every day's a vacation. I like to tell myself. Now I'm doing great, and I'm excited to be talking about the NFC South, and I'm excited for the guests that we have on tonight.
Yes. Welcome to the show, Brandon. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. I am here in New Orleans. It's hot and muggy and everything you'd expect in a New Orleans summer right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even in the worst of summer yet. That's to come here in a month or so.
It's going to be my first full-time summer in New Orleans. So we'll see how that, like you, I was in the Midwest for many, many years, but transitioning to this is going to be a little bit of a struggle, I think.
I picture just small puddles everywhere in your house just due to condensation and sweat. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's the mental picture that I have.
Puddles in my pockets everywhere, yeah.
So, yeah, we've got a great show. If you're joining us live, you can see we've got the little NFC South icon down at the bottom of the screen. So, yeah, we are continuing our divisional breakdown series here, talking all things NFC South. Should be a lot of fun. But before we get into it, let's do our normal house cleaning things. Go around the room. What are we drinking? Let's start with our guest, Brandon.
Well, I was talking to you guys just briefly before, but I actually work at a local brewery called Second Line Brewery. They're one of the best breweries in New Orleans. If you're ever in town, stop on by. But I am drinking one of their local ambers. It's an MSY, the name of the airport. So that's one of their flagship beers and one that I drink, on the daily down here at home. So cheers to you guys.
Cheers. I love a good amber. Amber is such, it's that smooth middle ground. You don't need something crazy hoppy and light with an IPA. You don't want something maybe as dark as what I'm drinking, which is from Titletown Brewing. It is a Coco Loco. It's a Mexican hot chocolate imperial stout. It's a rainy day here in Madison, Wisconsin. I thought I could go a little bit deep with this. So it's a 9%er. It doesn't taste like it though. I just get all of the delightful cocoa with a little hint of hot behind it.
I would drink that.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds delicious. I'm just drinking homebrew this evening. I finally kegged up my Mexican lager. So I'm drinking a nice pint of that to see how that actually tastes now that it's carved up and ready to go. So I'm excited for that.
Where's the lime?
I don't have any limes.
You're gonna have to invest.
I know.
Or you just kegged a Mexican lager. You're gonna have to invest in some limes for the rest of the summer to get ahead of that.
Yes, my fault.
Just
sorry, I apologize.
Just your homebrew, he says so humbly. I've had a great many of your homebrews. They're not just a homebrew; they're delightful. So, don't you
I
undersell
appreciate that. Thank you. In my mind, I'm a gold medalist, even though I've never had them judged. So that's fine.
You're the next Pabst. Easy.
I wish. Oh, my Lord. Anyway, Jake, do you want to get us into this drunk trade here?
You know I do.
Drunk.
Gold.
Drunk. Hammered drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
Justin, we were both so excited that we hit the
know.
button at the same time. We couldn't to get into this, and it canceled each other out. But we made it through, and we are talking about Reddit user JTK0930, initials, and then, I don't know, birth date, maybe? I'm not sure. I always like to guess the Reddit username. This one is just, it's It's so aloof. Anyways, they say a couple of weeks after our startup draft back in summer of 2021, I traded DJ Moore and a 2022 first-round pick for Carson Wentz. I'm a big Colts fan, and we were all drunk hanging out after a wedding. I was convinced Frank Reich would revive him. At the time, I was low on DJ because I missed out on some QBs in the startup draft that went right before I settled on him. So a little bit of FOMO led to this trade. It is a super flex dynasty league, half PPR. Boy, oh boy. DJ Moore and a first for Carson Wentz, who is sitting on his couch, I guess, right now, or maybe watching this live stream with us. So we know this is a bad trade. I get it. I don't want to dwell on the trade itself too much, gentlemen, but what I do want to ask, Carson Wentz, it feels like every year there is this type of quarterback who has maybe irrationally high value, likely because a homer is involved in the trade. Do we identify any quarterbacks right now who might fit the Carson Wentz mold, who, not saying you would give away this much for them, but who could be on the cusp of being out of the league even next year, but is a viable fantasy starter in people's minds right now? Anybody spring to mind for you?
I'll kick it off here. Off the top of my head, there's a couple, but Jimmy G, I could see him just being at the same place next year, like you said, on the couch, especially with this whole injury clause, the G clause that they have now. And then also Baker, although I feel like he could end up hanging around as more of a backup in the league, one of those long-term backups. But as far as someone that's going to be getting his last chance as a starter, I feel like this is kind of it for him.
Well, we're going to talk about Baker Mayfield, no doubt, later today. Brandon, do you have anybody else that springs to mind who might fit the Carson Wentz category?
Maybe like a Jared Goff or someone like that, who had a successful rebound year last year and is on a pretty building team, but I don't see him as a franchise quarterback, so he could be a possibility.
Yeah, Goff was one of the first names that came to mind when I read this. The other name, Ryan Tannehill, he's still technically there with the Titans right now. Their team is very weird. They could be moving in an entirely different direction in like 2 weeks. Honestly, we could see Ryan Tannehill getting traded somewhere and them just trying to reap some draft.
We could see Carson Wentz, and then maybe the trade makes sense.
And then, JTK, you will have won. Well, not one, but you will have redeemed some aspect of this drunk trade. This is a rough one. I'm not going to lie. I appreciate your vulnerability here in submitting this. I would have loved to have said, boy, we've had so many worse trades on the show. We've had bad ones.
I think the rationale behind it was okay. Thinking that Reich would revive Carson Wentz.
It was super flex.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't hate it from thinking that, because I was on board too. I mean, I wouldn't have paid that to get Carson Wentz, but
sure.
But I understand the thought process behind it.
Yeah,
I like it. I respect it. All right, we will not dwell anymore. We'll move to more positive things in talking about this division.
Yeah. So just as a reminder for everyone out there, for our new listeners, if you're just happen to be joining us, we'll go through every team, go through what their notable, I'll use air quotes here, notable losses and additions, because half the time they don't really matter. But who they lost and who they brought into the team, and then where they drafted fantasy relevant players in the draft. So I'm just going to go right down our show sheet because this is how it is, and it's my show, so I'm going to do that. We'll start with the Buccaneers.
You mean that we desperately have to end with the Saints because our representative here, Brandon, wants to go. Of
course.
That's what you meant.
Yeah, save the best for last.
That's right.
So we're going to start with the Bucs. Notable losses this offseason: Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Julio Jones, Scotty Miller, and Cameron Brate. They brought on board Baker Mayfield and Chase Edmonds. And in the draft, they drafted Payne Durham, tight end, in the 5th round. And in the 6th, they brought on Trey Palmer, wide receiver. So, Brandon, why don't we start with you? What are your thoughts about this Buccaneers team and some of these moves that they made here in this offseason?
They're definitely punting at the quarterback, bringing in Baker Mayfield. It's possible the new offensive coordinator, David Canales, I'm probably butchering that, might help. He helped out Geno Smith. He also has some of the best weapons around him in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But I don't have any confidence in Baker Mayfield as a fantasy quarterback or an NFL quarterback. But they had to do what they had with the budget. So that I think they're just in a rebuilding mode. I don't think they did a lot in the offseason to make this team any better. They let go of a huge amount of veterans, and I think it's full rebuild mode for them.
You know what I would love to see here as another offseason, a late offseason addition to this team? The guy we talked about earlier, Ryan Tannehill. If you can clear just a little wee baby bit of space and bring on somebody like Ryan Tannehill, I'd have so much more confidence in this team for fantasy. Obviously, with what we have, that's not currently the case. Kyle Trask. What about Kyle Trask? Can't he be the future of this franchise like they kept saying for months before they reluctantly brought in Baker Mayfield?
That says it all.
I do want to talk about, we have to obviously talk about the quarterback situation. Probably not for fantasy. Like, I don't think anybody cares about Baker Mayfield for fantasy, nor should you, except maybe if you're in the last round of a best ball draft or something. But I do want to talk about the guys that he's throwing to and what they can maintain for fantasy relevance. So Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, we don't have a ton of ADP to work with right now. Everything that I have right now that's legit is best ball, but they're going in the early to mid 30s for wide receivers for best ball, at least. Is that a value for these two, or is that appropriate, or is that still a stay away territory? Brandon, what are you doing with those two?
I think it's a value. I looked it up. I haven't been following ADP too much, but according to Fantasy Pros, Evans is wide receiver 31, Godwin is wide receiver 27. And over the past 4 years, obviously better quarterback play, but they've both finished in the top 15 over the past 4 years. So I'll shoot my shot on one or both of those. I mean, at that, especially if you're going heavy at running back early or something and you're waiting, you can get one of these, and just gobble up a lot of receivers in that range. So I think there's good value in a lot of that area right there for wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
With horrible quarterback play. But I think I'm a Mike Evans truther, but just with the style of Baker Mayfield play, Chris Godwin might be a slight edge that I might consider drafting over Evans, but I'll take either.
Yeah, both of them so late.
Yeah, I think that ADP just shows people are not sure who the main target's going to be in this offense, and it's just people hedging their bets. Like, well, draft them both late because we don't know. I am also a Mike Evans truther. He's good for 1,000 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns every year at a minimum. He's done it every single year he's in the league. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't continue to do that. He's a big body guy that can just go up and get it, which I think, Baker can appreciate. He's that big body target that he's going to look for in the end zone. And I just see the same thing that we've gotten from Mike Evans every single year. And I think, middling wide receiver 2 is probably where he'll end up. And if I can snag him at wide receiver 31 value, I'll do that all day long.
I have also been a Mike Evans truther. I think we talked about this a few episodes ago of like, I'm not leaving a best ball draft without Mike Evans at that range because it just seems silly to me. I am a little concerned. Shout out to Fantasy Life who had an episode about the Bucs come out today. They were talking about Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and what they can do if Baker's the guy. I didn't realize this. Maybe I had a mental block. But Baker Mayfield, since 2018, none of his wide receivers have finished higher than wide receiver 22 in points per game. That was the absolute ceiling. That was Jarvis Landry back in 2019. Otherwise, they've all, besides that one time, all of them have finished outside of the wide receiver 2 range. Like even 2022, when he started for the Panthers for 5 weeks. Who else remembers that he started for the Panthers for 5 weeks? I did not. That blew my absolute mind that Baker Mayfield did that. Feels like we're in a different time, or reality or something. But even then, DJ Moore is wide receiver 53 over those first 5 weeks with Baker. I'm scared, gentlemen. I'm very scared about these guys, but I still want to believe. But it sounds like we're all more on Mike Evans than Chris Godwin, probably.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think I'll take whoever falls to me.
Well, there's just go with your review there. And so if it's not the wide receivers necessarily who are doing great things, how about the running backs? So it's Rachaad White and I guess Chase Edmonds, right? There's nobody else there. Chase Edmonds, people thought was going to steal away a lot of work last year. Didn't end up doing that. Mm-hmm. So what's the thought on Rachaad White? Do you have any vested interest there, Brandon?
Again, ADP right now, he's at RB 24. He was an obvious timeshare with Leonard Fournette last year, who's no longer on the team. Todd Bowles believes he can be a 3-down back. The opportunity is there. I'm just not sure the talent is there to be an every down back. I do love the opportunity, but last year he only had 4 carries over 15 yards, 47th in forced missed tackles. I'm still not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they still add one of those veteran free agents that might be available to be that big back role. Super efficient catching the ball, though. Caught 50 of 58 targets for 290 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I just don't see him running hard and being like a true goal line back. He just hasn't shown that, at least in his rookie season. Maybe he'll get better his sophomore season, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they'll end up bringing in one of these veteran guys as the offseason progresses here. I just don't see it for him in a ton of upside. So I will probably avoid him unless he's really falling in the draft and then, pick him up as a later value. But I think the hype is just going to continue to grow as training camp starts and off season and everything. And then his ADP is just going to shoot up too much for me and get too rich for my blood.
Yeah, I mean, he's going around that Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, James Conner, David Montgomery era.
Give me all those guys over him.
I agree. And, if need be, I'm probably drafting a wide receiver right here anyway. But
Jake, are you still with us?
He's moving kind of slow, but maybe
we may have lost him.
Okay.
Anyway, so we'll continue on here. I guess, I mean, with this team, as far as any other fantasy producers, I mean, the tight ends, not really all that exciting. I mean, so they got K. Dotton.
I do like K. Dotton for Dynasty. I don't know that he'll necessarily produce this year, but
right.
If you're just punting the position, I think he's a dart throw tight end too, or just, maybe one of those you draft 2 tight ends and hope one of them pays off. I think he's a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I like him longer term, but until this quarterback situation is kind of in a more stable place, I can't trust him, especially with Evans and Godwin there, because they're gonna get the.
And we have Russell Gage too, who I don't think is. Maybe last round you throw a dart at Russell Gage or something, but other than that, I don't see a lot of fantasy production out of this team.
Yeah, same here. I don't know that there's much else to say about this team, so let's move on to the Falcons. So in the offseason here, they lost Marcus Mariota, Demir Bird, Olamide Zacchaeus. I know I butchered that. I'm sorry. And then Anthony Ersker. They brought on board Jonnu Smith, Taylor Heineke, Matt Collins, Scotty Miller, going from one NFC South team to another, and then Penny Hart. And in the draft, no surprise to anybody, in the first, took on Bijan Robinson. So I have to say, I really like what this Falcons team has been doing this offseason, more from a real football aspect than fantasy. I think they're really doing a good job. They attack the defense quite a bit, really trying to build that up. They focus on their O-line, try to shore that up a bit. So, well, I don't know that they're going to make a ton of fantasy noise this year, or hit the ceiling that we're all expecting from the players that they've drafted over the last couple of years, with Kyle Pitts and Drake London. I do like the trajectory that this team is heading on. I guess let's start off by saying or asking, with Ritter there at the helm now, at least for just this season, do you think he's going to make Kyle Pitts and Drake London more fantasy relevant than what we've seen over the past couple seasons?
I mean, Ritter is a bit of a question mark. We didn't get to see him much. They weren't letting him throw last season. He started the last 4 games for the Falcons. They just didn't want to throw the ball. Ritter averaged 29 pass attempts for 177 yards, but only threw for 2 TDs. I liked what he did in college, from Cincinnati. It was a very weak quarterback draft in last year in 2022. He was drafted in the 3rd round, so they don't have a lot of draft capital in him, but I do think they give him the chance to start and take this job. What I do like about this team, though, is it's a very thin route, tree of what we're looking for fantasy from the skill positions. And so I do think that he will be funneling those targets to Drake London and Kyle Pitts through the air, along with, the rookie Bijan Robinson out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the thought of all these fantasy players for this team. I don't know if I trust the coach. Obviously, we know Bijan's going to be great.
Right.
They love to run the ball. So I think that is like the one player that I'd just smash at almost any point in the draft. I mean, if we're going to talk, say, just a 1 QB redraft league, where are you going to take Bijan?
It's tough for me. I mean, I think he's a top 5 overall in redraft right now. I'm trying to think of, kind of look at where we are with running backs. But, I think I'm taking McCaffrey, Eckler, maybe Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, and Chubb and Henry and Bijan Robinson, those guys in that same sort of tier. I know that's a pretty wide tier. Most people would thin it down a little bit. But I think you get a stud running back out of any of those guys. I think he's going to be like overdrafted, and maybe already is, for a team that we're not sure. They're going to run the ball a lot. I mean, he's going to get that Derrick Henry workload. So, and he's got that Saquon Barkley sort of pedigree coming into the league. So I think you're not going to be disappointed. It's just how high you want to take him. Some people are talking about number 1 in redraft. I think that's too high. I'd gladly take around, 5.
Yeah, I think we had him like top 5. After Eckler, McCaffrey, Barkley. I'm missing someone. Anyway, about 5 or 6 is probably where I'd be comfortable taking them.
Henry, Chubb, that range. That's where I'm looking at it. But, the opportunity is definitely going to be there. the Falcons finished second in running attempts last season with 33 rushing attempts per game. And that was coming with Tyler Algier, who, for where he was drafted, I believe he was like fourth or fifth round rookie. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. He broke the rookie record for a season for the Falcons. They also had Cordarrelle Patterson rush for 700 yards and 8 TDs. So I think he's just going to, basically see that almost that full workload as a 3-down back right out of the game.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, getting back to the wide receivers, and I'm going to include Kyle Pitts with that as well, because he's essentially a wide receiver in this offense. They had the yards, or at least Kyle Pitts did, and they flashed at times, but I know we were really missing the touchdowns to really catapult them into the upper echelon of what we want to see out of these players. So I guess, what is your confidence that this offense is going to take a step forward and there is going to be a greater passing volume, knowing that these guys have another year in the league, and maybe with Ritter there, a full off season at the helm as the QB1, that maybe they'll take a step forward?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, Ritter averaged 29 pass attempts for 177 yards a game, but only threw 2 TDs last year. I think he takes a step forward. I mean, even if he's getting up in that 35 pass attempts per game, I think it gives it a shot. I really like Drake London a lot. I think he was incredible for a rookie. He averaged 30% target share, which was the 5th highest in the league. 33% target per route run, which was second. For the season, he had 117 targets, 72 receptions, 86 yards, 866 yards, but only 4 TDs. So that's where we're going into, and that's with horrible quarterback play. But kind of like, I mean, he's a big dude, but I mean, he can play everywhere, so they can move him around. He's a true X receiver. I think right now his ADP is about wide receiver 26, and I think he can outproduce that pretty easily. He was getting a 30% target share with Pitts on the field, and then it skyrocketed to, I think, like 39%. But both Pitts and Drake London should continue to just gobble up those targets and each see like 25+% target share for each of them.
Jake, are you back with us? Are you ready?
Mayfield, by the way, for me getting booted. When you were talking about a big-bodied guy moving all over the field, I just assumed you were talking about Jonnu Smith, by the way. But clearly, we are not ready for that discussion. I do think that Drake London's really interesting to me. I'm just probably not going to have any of these pass catchers on my team. I think it's going to be a Bijan or nothing proposition for me in the Atlanta Falcons this year.
Fair.
So we were saying earlier, Jake, that Bijan probably falls into that top 5 running back in redraft this year. Where do you think you would be taking him?
Sure that I would take over him right now. I think CMC, absolutely. I will draft CMC ahead of him. And I will probably talk myself into drafting Austin Eckler over him too. But then I think it's probably Bijan. I don't know. There's not many guys that I'm taking ahead of Bijan Robinson. Put it that way.
Okay. Fair enough. Let me get back to the show sheet here. I guess the last little note we had on here for this team, the Falcons, is going back to the quarterback position with Ritter. They brought in Taylor Heineke. Do we see a world where Heineke gets any starts this season, or are they really going to give Ritter this chance to prove that he's the guy, win or lose? And if they lose, they're like, okay, well, we'll just draft a quarterback, in the draft next year, and it's kind of no harm, no foul at this point.
You want me to take that one, or you want you guys?
talk about Taylor Heineke ever. So if you want to go ahead and talk about him, please do. But I do feel like it's an important question, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it a little bit before, but they didn't put a lot of draft capital into Ritter. He was a third-round quarterback in a weak quarterback draft. So I believe if he struggles, I don't think they'll have a problem flipping the switch to Heineke. If there's a struggle after say 6 games or something that it's just horrible, I don't think they'll have a problem switching, but I think they are going to give Ritter the chance, right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
At Heineke, but honestly, in terms of like an upgrade over Marcus Mariota, I think he is, and I think he can be a viable dude. Even if he does take over, I wouldn't have any interest for fantasy for him, but it would make me feel a little bit better about Kyle Pitts. Having Taylor Heineke there, I think I would actually prefer it potentially to Desmond Ritter for his fantasy value.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about Pitts much. When you were getting a new beer or whatever you were doing, but what are your thoughts on Pitts? He's coming off that injury where he missed the last 6 games. What are your thoughts on him this season?
What I was doing, I just needed an excuse for an extended bathroom break during the middle of all that. Kyle Pitts, I think, is going to be one of those guys who we overvalued his first year and now are undervaluing after a disappointing season last season. And I feel like people aren't ready for the middle ground, which is going to be him as like a Dallas Goedert kind of guy, which I'm completely fine with. I think that he is going to be completely usable, but his total is going to be, I could see that thing staying no lower than tight end 4 still. And I don't know if I quite want to pay that. Mm-hmm. What do you think? You rank, obviously, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews. I think last week on the show, we named George Kittle pretty much the de facto tight end 3. Would Pitts fall in line after him for you?
I draft Hawkinson above him. I draft Waller above him. To name.
Probably get later ADP
I'd even
for.
Draft David Njoku over him, to be honest, right now.
Ooh, that's spicy.
Dustin, what's your threshold for Kyle Pitts? Are you as out on him as Brandon is?
No, I think he falls into that tight end 4 to 6 range. I'm not out on him. I'm just tempered my expectations a little bit. As we're talking, get this quarterback position maybe a little bit more settled, whether it is Ritter and he takes a step forward and, he is their guy for the next handful of years, or they go out and get someone in the draft or free agency or whatever. I'm going to just kind of temper my expectations with him. And mainly because we know this is a run first offense. And while yes, if he's getting 25% target share, that's terrific. But if it's a low volume offense, that's 25% of super low volume. So like I said, tempered expectations at this point.
Half of his intended volume. I think we can all agree on that. By the way, Brandon, I shouldn't have said that you were out on Kyle Pitts. You might just be really in on David Njoku, for that matter.
Yeah, I think I'll wait, I should say, and get someone like a David Njoku, who I think could finish the year with a better year and get him 2 rounds later. So, and that might change with ADBs, but he's always been a value. I am a fan. I don't not like Kyle Pitts. I think he's, that ADP is kind of finally equaling out a little bit from his first year and his second year. I think, there's going to be that sort of common ground where it finally levels out this year, and maybe he is going to become more of a value. But quarterback play is going to, be a thing for this team.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we talked plenty enough here about this Falcons. Let's move on to the Panthers. In the offseason, they lost Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, and Deonta Foreman. They brought on board Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, Demir Bird, Hayden Hurst, Andy Dalton, DJ Chark. Busy offseason there. And in the draft, they.
By the way, I wrote this. This is my bad. I didn't put DJ Moore as a notable loss in here. I think we're just going to gloss over. He didn't mean anything to this team.
Way to go,
traded
Jake.
one DJ for another, though. They got DJ Chark, so you know what he does.
Way to make me look dumb, Jake. Thank you.
I owned it.
And in the draft, in the first round, quarterback Bryce Young, and in the second, wide receiver Jonathan Mingo. So, Jake, I'm going to have you kick off the Panthers talk here. What are your thoughts about this team and kind of the fantasy assets here for the 2023 season?
Gross to think about because there has to be fantasy value out of this team. There is going to be fantasy value out of this team. One guy who is Miles Sanders for me. I don't know where it comes from. I really don't. I'm struggling to rank the pass catchers right now. I think there's a lot of hope and not else personally. And it'll probably hinge on what the rookie does, what the rookie quarterback does. So just like every other team that we're talking about, yeah, it comes down to quarterback play to a large extent. And, maybe Andy Dalton starts a couple of games and then Bryce Young takes over. I don't know. But I don't love this. Miles Sanders, I'll plant my flag on, but anybody else I will not. So, Brandon, do you have anybody that you would plant your flag on this team?
I guess, I'll just go. I mean, I do like Bryce Young a lot, but he's going to be probably a quarterback too early in the season, in redraft purposes. The wide receiver room is just a crapshoot. I kind of wrote in my comments, gross. Can they just sign DeAndre Hopkins and make this question easier? But yeah, I'd go with Miles Sanders as the one true guy you can go after on this team for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, I think I'll complete the trifecta here and agree with both of you there. Although one guy might look at taking late if he falls is Mingo. I think he could come on, and we've seen this with wide receivers where they kind of come on the second half of the season. I think there is that opportunity there for him to have some fantasy relevant weeks. But again, the ceiling's pretty low. So he's more of a late round flyer that I'd take on him rather than someone I think could be a week in and week out fantasy producer that you can kind of snag late in the draft.
I think this offense is going to be hard to predict for wide receivers from week to week.
Jonathan Mingo to Kelvin Benjamin in terms of fantasy ceiling. I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not what we really want. But you could get some boom weeks out of him. To be fair, I think you could get boom weeks out of Adam Thielen too. It just depends on whether he actually scores a touchdown and if this offense can produce touchdowns consistently, which I don't know that they can.
Yeah, I don't know. I love Adam Thielen. I've loved him for years since he came in the league. The more I've been thinking about him this offseason, the more I'm kind of out on him. And it makes me really sad because I do love him. But I mean, it's not like last year in a higher powered offense with being opposite of Justin Jefferson that he was doing anything super special as the wide receiver 2 on that team. I mean, Hockenson came over and kind of took over that role. So I don't know, he might just be done as a reliable fantasy producer. I think for real football, probably a really good move for the Panthers, getting that veteran presence in the team, kind of teaching the young wide receivers how to play the game. I think that's all great from that aspect. But for fantasy, I really think I'm going to be out on him this year, unless he falls super, super late in drafts.
All a decent amount,
Yeah, I could see him being sort of that target hog in the first couple games where the rookie quarterback goes to the veteran, and that's the time I would just trade him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I mean, do we see Bryce Young playing the entire season, or do you think Andy Dalton's going to get the first like 4 to 6 games, let the rookie get a little bit more acclimated? Or, I mean, they traded up to get this guy. So are they just going to be like, let's go get him out on the field, take your lumps and just have him learn that way?
Put Andy Dalton in there for a legitimate length of time, unless it's just like, all right, we'll walk through this just to kind of get you some time to observe from the sidelines here, Bryce. We'll give you a couple of games to do that and kind of ease you in. But there's no way you put that kind of investment into him, I wouldn't think, as a very rebuild type of team to just be like, nah, we're going to wait with him. So I do think that he plays the majority of the season, if not, 90% of the games. I'd be shocked.
Okay, fair enough. And then I guess just one last question here, because there's not a lot to talk about here with the Panthers, unfortunately. But Jake, you were putting together the show sheet, so I'm really curious for you. I know you said you plant your flag on Miles Sanders, and you asked the question, can he be a fringe RB1? So do you really believe that he could be a fringe RB1 this season?
The question, I don't know if he can be an RB1 or a fringe RB1, but I think it's interesting. Like, we've seen a lot of running backs do very well in this offense the last couple of years. Yeah, one of them happened to be a generational talent in Christian McCaffrey, but like Deonta Foreman had a lot of good fantasy utility last season. And I think that Miles Sanders would be more involved in the pass catching realm than he was. So, Brandon, I'll throw it to you. Where do you think realistically his range of outcomes is for this year?
I mean, they obviously put some investment in him. They signed him for a 4-year deal for $25 million. So I think he's the unquestioned lead back in this system. There is the rumblings off season that we hear that Chuba Hubbard could possibly get work as a goal line back. I'm not worried about Chuba Hubbard. I don't think I think Sanders is going to get that opportunity, but he's, last year he was behind the best offensive line in the NFL. He's no longer behind that. He's not really known as a pass catcher. He's only averaged 2.7 targets and 1.8 receptions throughout his career. So I see him as an RB2. I just don't see him as an RB1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you, Brandon. I mean, I think he'll probably have a safe floor for the season, but I don't know that you're going to get those big weeks out of him, kind of like what we saw last year. I think that's enough gross Panthers talk because that's just not exciting. We saved the best for last, though. Let's move on to the Saints here. Notable losses: Andy Dalton, Jarvis Landry, and Marquez Callaway. They brought on board Derek Carr, Jamal Williams, Foster Moreau, Jesse James, and Brian Edwards. And in the draft, in the 3rd round, Kendre Miller, running back. In the 4th round, Jake Hayner, quarterback. And in the 6th, A.T. Perry, wide receiver. So, Brandon, we will let you just talk as much as you want here about your Saints and how you're feeling about them for this upcoming season.
I think it's going to be confusing a little bit for fantasy. Derek Carr was brought in. I think he's, sort of a middling quarterback. I kind of wish they signed him to more of like a 1 or 2 year deal versus a long-term deal, but he is what he is. I think he's an upgrade for sure over what they've had. It should make, for a better, consistent fantasy relevant team. But what we're going to be struggling with, I guess I'd start with the running backs, right? So we have Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, all fighting for, what you think are going to be all starting possibilities for them. Kamara right now is struggling. He faces a suspension to start the season. He still has a trial date set for July 1st. So, that's the biggest question mark. They brought in Jamal Williams coming off like a career 1,000-yard season with 17 rushing touchdowns. So I think he's going to be that goal line back. And then they drafted Kendre Miller, who I think is going to be a young person, a great running back in the future, but I don't know. We'll have to see if Alvin Kamara is there. I don't know that he gets touches right away. So, and then there's Taysom Hill, who also is that gadget player who scored 7 rushing touchdowns last year. So I'm as confused as anyone to that running back field. What do you guys think?
So gross. Why are we talking about so much grossness? Why is this division intent on giving us so many headaches? I don't know. I think Alvin Kamara's court date, as you noted, that's the domino to fall. Once that happens and we know what the suspension actually looks like, we'll get a clear picture. Because I don't know about you guys, but I do think that Kendre Miller, maybe it's all the hype that I've seen recently on Twitter, but I do think he could probably step into Alvin Kamara's role and kind of be the Alexander Madison to his Dalvin Cook. Like, it's not going to be exactly the same. We're not going to get top 5 production out of him, but we could see a reasonable facsimile of what Kamara did with Kendre Miller there. And I think Jamal Williams then becomes the Mark Ingram type. And yeah, he's going to steal touchdowns and vulture touchdowns because that's what he does. But I think that if Kamara doesn't get a lengthy suspension, that's where it just all falls apart for me. And then I probably will stay away from most of these guys. Dustin, do you have intent to draft any of these guys right now, assuming a 6 to 8 game suspension for Kamara?
The only one I'd probably be interested in, and it depends on where his ADP is, and that would be Jamal Williams, just because I do think he is going to have that same role that he had in Detroit. And as you said, Jake, kind of that Mark Ingram, Latavius Murray role of running backs that they've had there in New Orleans for years. And he's going to be that goal line guy. So depending on where his ADP is, I'd be interested in him because I do think there's going to be a fairly safe floor there for him. And someone that you could easily use for like a bye week fill in or, your flex play. Other than that, though, I just, with the rookie, with Miller, I just don't know what to expect out of him. Assuming he does take over that Kamara role, assuming Kamara is suspended. And then if Kamara is not, I don't know. I can't say I'm that high on Kamara to begin with anyway. And I don't know why. I don't have a good, logical reason for it. I will say it's totally just a gut feeling at this point. So just where Kamara would probably end up being drafted, say there's no suspension, just where his ADP probably would be at, I think I would be out on that, given that cost.
Is where do we draft Taysom Hill? The true front runner in this backfield, as Brandon pointed out. I hate that. Can we finally say with Derek Carr in town, at least, that the Taysom Hill experiment at quarterback will mostly be over? Can we at least feel some level of confidence Derek Carr steps in, if only for this year or this year and next, and he's the guy and they don't have to tinker with that? Brandon, do you have Derek Carr on your radar at all in one quarterback leagues, or is he persona non grata in that?
I mean, he's a QB2 for me. So, more and more people are drafting 2 quarterbacks, even in one quarterback league. So he's a bye week player, or someone that if you're waiting on QBs and sort of alternating who you're starting week to week, I think he's a solid play. He's got that easy floor. He's not going to kill you from week to week, but the upside probably isn't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, especially playing in this division. It's not like any of these defenses are super stout defenses. I mean, they're okay, but they're not like the upper echelon of defenses. So, this is a guy that you could play the matchups with, like you're saying, Brandon. If you're kind of punting the QB position a little bit, have him as one of those later round QB selections. If you wanted to play that game.
And then we're going to have to wait to hear that Kendre Miller is also starting at quarterback, since he played high school quarterback before he went to TCU and became a running back. So we're going to have
brains in New Orleans are just going to figure out a 12 quarterback rotation by the time this thing, and maybe it doesn't matter which of them is throwing to Chris Olave because he's just going to be great no matter who's back there, right? Can we get on that level that Chris Olave is going to have a breakout season here?
Yeah, I think it's a little easier for the wide receiver core, right? I mean, we've got Chris Olave who had a breakout rookie year. He was only the third Saints receiver to have a 1,000-yard season as a rookie. He was just great. He was 72 receptions for 1,000+ yards and 4 TDs. Michael Thomas, that's the big question mark. Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be motivated? I probably will still have a bit of shares of Michael Thomas. He's hard to quit because the upside's certainly there, but he has not played a whole lot in the past 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, it's a really shallow route tree as far as, it's Juwan Johnson at tight end, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas really that are going to be the target hogs on that team.
Thomas is a hard guy to quit, isn't he? Dustin, have you quit him officially? You seemed like last time we spoke, you were more on the quitting Michael Thomas train.
I am. He's one of those that if he's falling super late and he becomes like an extreme value, sure, why not? Take a flyer on him. Because, like Brandon said, we've seen what he can do. 3 or 4 seasons ago, he was the wide receiver 1 by like a large margin. So we know there's that range of outcomes. Well, probably not anymore. Let's be honest. If we haven't seen it, him on the field that much over the last few years. So, but he still could be a fantasy relevant player if there's some juice left and he's finally healthy. Maybe he's tired of all the naysayers saying that he's washed up and injury prone and, all this other stuff. He's tired of people coming at him on Twitter and, wants to shut them up. So maybe he's got some extra motivation this year to do that and he'll have a semi-decent season. But yeah, getting back to your question, if he falls late enough, sure, I'll take a flyer on him, but he's not someone I'm actively going after to try to draft this year.
I guess I'm legitimately more curious about Chris Olave's true ADP and who the guys are that we're drafting him over. I want to throw a couple of names at you and just say, based on where they're perceived to be going right now, who would you rather have for this season? So first, Chris Olave or DK Metcalf? Who would we rather have for redraft this year? Brandon, we'll start with you.
I think I'd go DK Metcalf.
What are you thinking?
I would probably go Olave. That's really close, though.
Target competition versus what DK is looking at?
I guess I think Chris Olave has a week-to-week safer floor, but DK offers the higher ceiling, the week-winning weeks. I don't know that Olave would necessarily give you those boom weeks, but I like, especially if you're drafting a guy that high, because you're going to have to draft him in the first 3 rounds probably. So if I'm drafting a wide receiver that high, I want someone that I know is going to be consistent for me week in and week out, where I'll take more of those boom busts. I'd rather take the boom bust of Tyler Lockett, on like the 7th round or 8th round rather than DK in the 3rd. But that's just my style of play.
Completely fair. You do have to assess your own individual team and your threshold for, let's say, discomfort, maybe with some weeks of like what the highs and lows are going to be. I'll throw one more name out there. They're inching closer and closer together in ADP. Chris Olave is still behind this guy, but let's say if they have a half-round difference, who would you rather have, Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave? Who would you aim for with a half-round discount on Chris Olave?
I don't think you can go wrong with either. I'd probably take Wilson. But again, you're splitting hairs at that point, and I don't think you're going to go wrong with either player. But I think I'd just take Wilson. What about you, Brandon?
I'd go to Wilson as well. I just, coming into that draft, they both came from the same school. I actually thought Olave might be the better player, more NFL ready, but they're two different styles of players. Olave is just that smooth route runner, great hands, but that play after catch ability of Wilson is just like going to give you those explosive weeks that you're hoping for in fantasy.
Yeah, and the only reason I think I really give the edge to Wilson, not that Rodgers is leaps and bounds at this point in his career that much better than Carr. I think he still has that accuracy though, and if he's hitting Wilson in stride, like you're saying, Brandon, he can house it then at any point. So that's really that determining factor for me.
Yeah, that wide receiver core is super deep for the Jets, though. So that's another one that could be confusing week to week. But I think they want to give him every opportunity to succeed. So,
yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Any other thoughts here with the Saints?
I guess we didn't really talk about Juwan Johnson too much, but I think, he is basically another wide receiver that will be, he's a tight end, but he kind of is like a big slot wide receiver. I think he could have a good year, especially with Carr. Like you take an example of Hunter Renfrow, how he recorded 103 targets or 103 receptions for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2021. He does love that slot receiver, and if Juwan Johnson just consistently lines up in that slot, I think it could be you could get great value at tight end with Juwan Johnson.
So good sneaky later round pick there, taking Johnson. I like that because he had a few. Was it like 3 out of 4 weeks towards the end of the season? He had like double digit touchdown. Double digits, multiple touchdown games. That's the word I was looking for.
Well, he led all Saints pass catchers last year with 7 touchdowns. So, for whatever that's worth.
But how many of those games were Taysom Hill active for, though? I have to ask. I think all of them, actually. I just want to be done with Taysom Hill, but I can't stop talking about him, so it's a real dichotomy that I have here. If we're done with the Saints, I do have one last question here to wrap up this division because it's such a weird division. It just is, especially because I think maybe 2 of these teams have their quarterback of the near future. So out of this group, for redraft purposes, which quarterback from these teams are we most comfortable drafting in a 1 quarterback league if we have to? Let's say they're all going to be super, super late rounds. But of this bunch, who would we rather have? Brandon, let's start with you. Out of this group, Derek Carr or somebody else?
Well, yeah, I think I'm going to go with Derek Carr.
Dustin, anybody besides him?
For me, it'd be Carr, Ritter, Young, Baker in a far fourth.
Yeah, I'm not interested in drafting any of them. But Derek Carr, I think, by default, maybe he can surprise us. He's a decent quarterback. He is. And for fantasy, he's always been more of the underrated kind of Kirk Cousins-y type of fella, as we talk about often on here. So I'm sure he'll be fine. But for quarterbacks right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll pretty much wrap it up here. Brandon, before we let you go, 2 things. First, go through and tell us how you think this division is going to shake out 1st through 4th. And then why don't you let everyone out there know where they can find you, what you're up to, things like that. Anything you want to shout out at this point, basically.
I'm going to just say my Saints are going to take it. Then, the Dirty Birds will probably be second. After that, I guess I'll go Panthers and then Buccaneers. But it could be interesting that, like I said previously, Atlanta does have a very easy schedule, so that could help them out quite a lot. I believe they're touted to have the easiest schedule in the NFL this season, so that could make for things to be interesting. But you can find me at Chubbsburger on Twitter and also on Instagram. Right now, I just finished with a friend of mine, John Messenbrink. We did a lot of upcoming draft content. So if you're interested about any of these rookies, we did cover a lot of the fantasy relevant positions from quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. So that's up there on the website, which you can find on if you just go to Twitter and click on my Chubbsburger page. And then we do a weekly waiver wire show in season with my co-host Mike at RFL Red Zone. Jake was kind enough to come on last season. So we have guests coming on from all over the fantasy industry for like the first 10 to 15 minutes just to talk about what they're doing, how they got in the industry, and then talk about the fantasy waiver wire ads of the week at all positions. So you can look forward to that during season.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, it's great. Definitely go check that out, folks. Jake, any last parting words here before we head out?
We got through the NFC South, and I feel actually much better, to be fair, about the NFC South coming out of it than I did going into it. So that's a testament, I think, to Brandon, especially here. I think we've squeezed some juice from this division, but no, I'm excited that we have another one here in the books. We're almost halfway. I think we are halfway, Dustin, through the divisions, and they're flying by, man. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Getting into the throes of the summer here, training camps, OTAs, all that good stuff will be starting. So keep your eyes open for all that fun tidbits and news that are going to be coming out.
Will I be seeing you guys at the Fantasy Expo again this year?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Okay. Yep. Wouldn't miss it. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun, folks. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, please do so. Go to the expo. It's a lot of fun. You could see all three of our lovely faces there and hang out with us, along with many others in the industry, and not lots of fans just showing up too, hanging out. It's a lot of fun. As always, folks, give us 5 stars wherever you rate your podcast. Subscribe to us here on YouTube if you want to see Jake and my smiley faces every single week. We are here live. Other than that, enjoy this off season as it progresses, and we'll just talk to you next week, folks.
Thanks, guys.